Hello, and thank you for joining us for tonight's 22nd Legislative District Virtual Town Hall. I'll be your moderator for tonight. You can ask a question by leaving a comment on the live stream wherever you're watching. We also have some questions submitted in advance from constituents across the district. But first, let's kick things off with an introduction from each of our members. Senator Bateman?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm happy to be with you here today to give you a legislative update and hear about your concerns and answer your questions. My name is Jessica Bateman, and I serve as your state senator now. I served in the House for 4 years, and I am the chair of the Housing Committee. And one of the biggest issues that we've heard from our constituents is about the high cost of housing, how difficult it is to find a home, people being unable to afford their rents. And we've been addressing this in the Housing Committee on the Senate side through a 3-tiered system, which is increasing the supply of housing, making sure that we have housing of all shapes and sizes for people so that everyone has access to a home, increasing things like middle housing, accessory dwelling units. We've also been working to stabilize people in their homes to make sure that they're able to stay in their homes, they're not falling into homelessness, falling behind on their rent, and also increasing our support of the programs that fund and create affordable housing in our communities, like Habitat for Humanity. There's a couple big bills in those bucket areas, the first being rent stabilization. That's a bill that has not passed the legislature in the last couple years. It's come to our committee, and we are working very hard to make sure that we pass that. It includes a cap on how much rent can be increased. For the first year that a tenant is in a new lease, it can't be increased at all. And then after that, there's a cap. There's also some extended notification requirements for if a person is leaving, and also for increases in rent to help protect renters. That bill will be heard tomorrow in the Senate from the House version. We moved our Senate version out of our committee, but now we've gotten the House version. So we're hoping to take action on that very soon. This is the House of Origin cutoff was last week, so we're in a mad scramble to get all these bills to the floor again, so we can make sure that they pass by the deadline in September or in April. Also, Housing Accountability Act is a big bill that I'm focused on. It makes sure that all the good bills that we passed in the last couple years, telling cities that they need to allow for the construction of different types of housing, like ADUs, middle housing, co-living spaces, that they're actually enacting those policies on the ground level and implementing them. It'll provide an opportunity to make sure everyone's putting in their fair share of the housing that we need. That bill is in the House now. It passed the Senate. And then there's a bill that I have on reducing parking, so making sure that we're modernizing and reforming our parking as we grow so that we can increase the development of housing. It's just about making it more flexible. We'll still have parking that's actually created, and we'll make sure that people have access to that, but it's not going to be a one size for every single project, the same amount. It'll be based on the actual need, how far it's located from transit, and the different components that are there. That's kind of a high level of some of the housing bills that we've been working on. We definitely want to make sure that people know that we're working on rent stabilization. If you have any comments about that bill, it's being heard tomorrow in the Senate Housing Committee, and we would love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm Representative Beth Doglio. I'm very excited to chat with you all today and answer questions from you. I serve on appropriations and state government and tribal affairs, and I also serve as your chair of the Environment and Energy Committee. I'm looking forward. I know I feel like this is an uneasy, anxiety-provoking time for us. I did want to say I wish we were in person. And we are planning an in-person town hall in early April. We tried to get that date so that we could share that with you today, but I do feel like it's an important time to be in community, given all the things that are going on in Washington with the budget challenges, as well as in our nation with all the different changes coming down from the federal level very rapidly and very quickly. So I'm excited to answer your questions today. And we'll turn it over to Representative Parshley.
Thank you, seatmates. I always somewhat hesitate after going after these two amazing women. This is my first year in the legislature, and so I'm in a process of learning as well as stepping up and trying to do the work of our district. And I would echo some of the things that both of them have said. It is a trying, it's a scary time. And you put all the things happening in the federal government on top of our very difficult budget year. I am serving not only on local government as a vice chair, which is kind of a companion committee to the housing committee, because we're looking at ways to expedite the ability to build housing. I'm also serving on healthcare and long-term care. And that is looking at some of the options that we can do to make healthcare more affordable and more accessible. Now, lastly, I've been working with my chairman and all my committee mates on the finance committee. And for those of you who don't know, appropriations is the expenditure part of the budget for the House, and finance is how we're going to build revenue streams. And for the last couple of months, that's been our primary focus, is how are we going to help with this budget process and where we're going to go from there. And I have a lot to learn, but I'm in it for the long haul. And I am definitely excited to be here and feel privileged to be here in the face of everything that's happening in our country.
Thank you so much. Like I said, we had a lot of questions submitted in advance. One that we heard from a significant number of folks was, there are a lot of state employees in your district. Where do you stand on the proposed furloughs?
Well, I would love to jump in, if it's okay with my seatmates, on this one, partly because we've been talking about this to a degree in finance, and I'd love to have their input afterwards. And I want to parrot what the chair of finance, April Berg, has been saying. Furloughs don't make sense. They don't add up. We're against them. This is not the way to balance our budget. It really doesn't, because if you're going to put furloughs in, you have to build in exemptions. And by the time you get done building all the exemptions in, they're really not going to save us a lot of money. So it's not our first step. And I'm personally very much against that.
I'm 100% opposed. State workers are providing all of the services that our most vulnerable constituents need. They are the backbone of our state. Public service is super important, and that is not a good place, in my opinion, to cut.
Yeah, we're all in alignment on this one, which is no surprise, because as representatives for the 22nd Legislative District, which is the most public sector, labor concentrated district in the state, we're acutely aware of the work that our state employees do. We also know that our state employees, many of them that were there during the last Great Recession, didn't receive COLAs for a number of years, and they're still catching up from that. And we know that they competitively, in terms of salaries, that there's other sectors where they could make more money, and they're working for the state of Washington to be public servants and to do that work. And we don't want to take away the paychecks that they're getting. And I was a state employee the last time they instituted furloughs, and it was very difficult. So we stand united in our position on that.
Thanks so much. One of the other questions that we heard from Paula and a number of other folks about was, how are you responding to Trump's dismantling of our government and firing of federal workers?
Well, with as much anxiety as many of you are, it is very anxiety provoking to see all of the cuts, whether it's the EPA, Veteran Services, all of the cuts around food banks, which impacts our farmers. I mean, I'm not sleeping at night. It's very troubling. We are doing everything in this state to make sure that programs that save lives, like food security, like Medicaid, like housing, stay intact as much as possible. The state, I mean, obviously we are in a budget crisis, so we can't pick up all of the pieces, but we are passing bills to make sure that our trans kids are protected. For example, I mean, that's a really important piece of this. So we are, passing pieces of legislation to keep Washingtonians working, and making sure we're protecting our kids. And then, we are also staying very focused on trying to get our budget balanced and making sure that we are protecting lives in Washington State. I'm sure others.
I would also add that ditto to everything that Rep. Doglio said. In addition to that, we had a guest in our caucus yesterday, and I'm sure that my colleagues on the other side did as well. Senator Murray came in and talked to us about what's happening at the federal level. She led the push to not adopt the continuing resolution, and unfortunately that was not successful. But one of the messages that she told us, in addition to these being dangerous and unprecedented times that are also keeping her awake at night, is that she's focused on telling the stories of the federal workers that are being fired, because she wants to fight back against this people not knowing the work that they do, and then just having them being fired and not having their voices heard and not having those stories told about the work that they're actually doing. So it's not just some invisible person working at VA. It's an employee that answers the phone when your grandfather calls to access for his medications or to make sure that he's trying to get access to an appointment. And apparently those agencies are telling their staff, do not talk to your congresspeople. So her message to us was, please tell your constituents, if any of them have been impacted, to contact her office. You can always contact our office and we can help connect you. But we want to make sure that those voices are heard and that the public knows about the real life consequences of these cuts and what it means to the American people.
I don't have a lot to add, except for that a lot of the emotions everybody's feeling, we're feeling. We're working as hard as we can and keeping a half eye on this as we build our budget, and being able to have a little bit of resiliency in it for whatever the federal government throws at us. And absolutely, Senator Murray was very clear. Reach out to her if you have stories. Absolutely.
I would just say, she was also very clear that now is not the time to be timid and to back down, that the only thing that is going to pull us out of what we're in right now is people. It is you and me and people. So raise your voices and be very assertive about work that you're doing in the community, because it's really, really important. That is what is going to save our democracy.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We're going to go to a question that was actually just submitted on YouTube from Alfie. So we just heard that the revenue forecast is grimmer than predicted. How does that impact your continuing work and the important housing and other critical services already facing reductions?
Well, it's nice to know you're on here, Alfie.
Beth, do you want to take that? Do you want to start that one, and then I can help with what
I think you should talk about the revenue.
Side?
We're doing a sort of a balanced approach, right? We're making cuts. Again, we're really prioritizing things that save lives when we're making those cuts. So, but we will see a budget that has significant cuts in it. Sitting on the appropriations, every bill was whittled down to the very, very essentials of the bill. And costs were moved out of them. And so you're not going to see anything new coming big that's new out of this legislature unless it is bringing in money. And if we get to environmental stuff, I can talk a little bit about that. But Lisa's on our finance committee and just heard a couple of bills today that I think she might want to share with you on the revenue side.
Yeah, I have to give a lot of credit to the leadership in our House, especially the finance committees, whether they be appropriations, transportation, or finance itself. But we've been somewhat preparing for today. Our details of what our bills will look like are being firmed up after today's report. But I can tell you there are going to be three major out of the House. I know the Senate has several. Maybe Senator Bateman can handle that after I'm done here. But out of the House, we have three major revenue bills that are going to be coming out. The first is called intangible property tax. Now, this is a difficult understanding because intangible means things like stocks and bonds. It doesn't mean your actual property, your buildings. And there'll be a tax over $50 million. So if you've made $48 million, you won't be hit with this tax. if you've made 52 million, you'll be only giving the tax for the 2 million above the 50. So that will be one. The second is one that I have actually been working on with Representative Berg, Representative Scott, and Representative Fitzgibbons, which is a combination of B&O tax and an increase on a surcharge on financial institutions. The B&O charge will be over 250 million gross, which means if a business makes over $250 million, they're already paying about 1.2% surcharge. We're going to take that up to about 1.9%, and we're going to exempt any agriculture and manufacturing. Now, why are we doing manufacturing? Because that also represents industries that's providing jobs for the state of Washington. This, if we do these numbers, we'll only be hitting somewhere between 250 and 350, 400 businesses. The financial surcharge, once we get above a certain amount, and this was unknown until we got the actual numbers today, but we were playing around with anything over $1 billion. We're going to go from the 1.2 to the 1.9 surcharge. And then the last one is kind of a combination bill between allowing us to go from the 1% property tax to the 3% based on CPI. So we can lift the property tax up to 3%, but not above that, even if the inflation rate is above it. This will also allow the cities to do this. And then they are going to wrap into that the ability of school districts to do the same thing, to be able to help even that out. Now, that one I'm not as sure about because we just heard about it today. All three of these bills are expected to drop, meaning we'll be able to have the public look at them sometime Friday, possibly Saturday. So look on the web, they are coming. We are working out the fine details after today's announcement. And we're hoping this will help provide a significant reduction in our deficit somewhere. I don't want to give the amount because we really have to go back and calculate after today's and getting the exact details in there, but it is going to be a substantial reduction in the deficit.
And I would say I can't speak to I'm not on the Ways and Means Committee yet. So I can't speak to the specifics of the policy proposals that you're going to see out of the Senate, although I think some of them will be similar. What I can say is that we're going to have a number of progressive revenue options that we're going to propose. And Washington is right now the second worst progressive in the whole country for how our tax code is and how it disproportionately impacts working families and low-income people. And this situation that we find ourselves in is scary. It's a huge, daunting task to look at a budget shortfall that's that large. I am hopeful that this will be an opportunity for us to create a sustainable revenue system for our future. And I'm hopeful that we're going to see some really big moves that we're going to take this session to make sure that this doesn't happen again. The other thing I would say is that I was a legislative assistant years ago when we had the last recession, when Democrats didn't have a majority, and we saw an all cuts budget. And we're in a better situation right now because we're looking at a balanced approach. We're not just going for an all cuts budget, and that's unacceptable to us. We're focusing on the sustainable solution, which is actually passing progressive taxation and progressive revenue. A lot of these Parshley didn't mention it, but the wealth tax is a tax that's going to impact a very, very small percentage of Washingtonians. That's going to provide a huge benefit. We saw progressive revenue and the capital gains tax being upheld in our initiative process last year on the ballot. So we know that there's support for these programs that we have, and there's support for a more sustainable and holistic revenue system. Also, these programs, people ask us, why are we in the situation that we're in? Why did we spend too much money? We've had an unsustainable revenue system for a really long time. We saw those revenue cuts that happened during the Great Recession. And in the last couple of years, we've worked really hard to expand important programs like the Working Families Tax Credit, childcare access for people. And these programs, long-term care insurance, they're popular. People are using them. These are successful programs that people support, people want to use, and are helping families that's a good thing. We need to have a revenue system that ensures that the wealthiest among us and the people that make the most money and are doing so well, thanks to the infrastructure of Washington State and the people that we have here, that they are putting forward a solution in terms of paying their fair share so that we can have an even stronger economy and a stronger social safety net. And we're looking forward to releasing that, I believe, this week. And then next week, you're going to see more specific details that we can point to.
All right, we're going to pivot to another submitted question. This one's from Tamara, and it's, what are you doing to help women coming from out of state to receive reproductive health care, and how can we help?
So this is something that we've fortunately been thinking about for quite some time. Ever since the Dobbs decision, you saw us act, a group of lawmakers on both sides in the Senate and the House. I was in the House at the time, got together, and we created a package of legislation aimed at protecting reproductive rights for not only people in Washington State, but people outside of our state as well. So in Washington, thankfully, we have things like we protect providers from out-of-state vigilantes that want to come and hold our providers accountable for their Byzantine laws and policies that they have there. We also make sure that individuals can get access to reproductive care regardless of their economic status. So there's no copays required if you need to get access to an abortion in Washington State. We have a fund that's available for individuals that need access to care. So that's an option for people. I think the question was specific to people from out of state. We also increased our funding in the last biennium for health centers that provide these services and health providers. I think we're going to, looking at this budget, we're going to have to see if that continues, and that's a priority, I'm sure. The other thing, we've helped provide protection for the actual providers themselves, things like anonymity for them so they can put their clinic name on the label of a medication versus their actual name, because we've seen them be targeted. So we've been working on this. We'll continue working on it, not only for people in our good state, but also for folks that are outside of our state as well. If you want to do additional things to help, I would say, organizations like Planned Parenthood are really struggling right now, and they're one of the premier organizations helping get access to care. And if you can volunteer or help them in any way, that would be good.
We can take our next question, which is also a pre-submitted one that we heard from a number of people, which is, how can we increase funding for public schools this year?
So I'll take that one. We have been working hard. There are bills on both sides, the House and the Senate, addressing the maintenance, supplies, and operating costs, otherwise known as MSOC. That is very flexible money for school districts to use on a variety of different sort of fixed asset costs that they have. Of course, we are still working to fully fund special ed. And finally, transportation is another place where pretty much all of the education advocates have come together and made those three priorities. And there are bills to address each of those. They are different flavors in the House. The House came in with lower dollar numbers. The Senate, which we're hearing tomorrow, the Senate versions of those bills in appropriation. So I will have more information on sort of how the Senate has been working to address the issue around school funding. I will also say that I do see a lot of concerns about property taxes in the chat and the questions that we got. I think there is the possibility of potentially raising the levy lid. That is something that the superintendents in District 22, so North Thurston, Tumwater, and Olympia, all have larger capability, levy capability that you have voted for as voters. So that would immediately assist all three of our districts. So that is also on the table. It is the paramount duty in our Constitution to fund education. We recognize that districts around the state are having issues with their budgets, and we've seen Tumwater laying off 17 people, and we are doing everything possible to pass bills that will bring more money into our school districts to ensure that our kids have the best possible education in the state of Washington.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
If I could just add one thing, the revenue streams that I was talking about are primarily going to go into the general fund. And for those of you who don't know, I think the rate is around 60% of our general fund goes to the schools. So this will help preserve that portion of the general fund for schools so we can at least maintain where we're at.
Thank you. We had a question submitted from Steve about, will you stand firm in your support of Senate Bill 5085 to give PERS 1 and TERS 1 retirees a permanent COLA, and what can we do to help?
Yeah, so that was a bill. We did hear that bill in appropriations, so it has come over from the Senate, and there are two bills in play, basically that sort of take the left one and combine it into one fund that includes PERS and TERS. And the Senate version does include a permanent COLA for our PERS 1 and TERS 1. I think that's a great approach, and it's very creative because our left one pension fund is very flush and has a lot of money in it. And so combining those, our Chair Ormsby in the House has an approach to it, which gets us more dollars in the long term. And then we have Chair Robinson, Ways and Means in the Senate, that is also a very valid and good approach to it. And so, as you know, I have been a firm supporter and a very strong advocate for a permanent COLA for our PERS 1 and TERS 1. Obviously, this is some of the lowest income folks in the state, and definitely want to make sure that we address this issue once and for all. Yes. Is my answer in short.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that bill, the Senate version passed out of the Senate, so it's now on the House side, and I voted in support of that bill. I think that there was, over time, we've seen the PERS and TERS folks not get those COLAs and not get the state investment. And so by doing this, it's going to create, the left one has an excess of funds. It's been heavily funded. And so every single person that's in left one will continue getting their full benefits for the duration of their utilization of them. So it's financially secure, even if we do this combination, there's no threat to it whatsoever.
My answer is simple, yes.
Perfect. Up next, we will take one submitted online from Wayne, who's watching on YouTube. And that's, is our CETA deadlines for clean energy implementation in jeopardy by any federal acts or presidential executive orders?
Wayne, that's a great question. I don't believe so. I think we have a lot of concerns. That was something that Patty Murray talked a lot about, is the cuts at BPA, which obviously is absolutely vital to making sure that that our lights stay on, and our houses stay warm or cool. But I don't think at this time that I would say that we're in jeopardy of not being able to meet our clean energy targets because of the federal government's actions. We still are able to regulate in that space, and we will continue to work with our utilities to help them meet the targets. And we do have some bills. A lot of what we're doing right now in the environmental space is implementing the laws that we passed in the last 5 or 6 years, and CETA is no different. We have a bill that works to make sure that unspecified energy does not create, that comes from BPA, does not create penalties for our PUDs in particular. So that's a little implementation bill that we're working on this year to make sure that we're keeping our PUDs from getting penalized because of actions at the federal level. But we have concerns. We don't know what's going to happen with the overall portfolio of BPA. So it's super important to keep our eye on that and attuned to that.
Thank you. We're going to go to another submitted question from AD, and that's, are there any considerations of removing parking minimums for all housing?
That was a question directly at me, unless they didn't know. It's a surprise. So yes, we have a bill. For those of you that don't know and aren't in the weeds on parking requirements are standard, and every city in Washington has minimum requirements for constructing housing. And although 25% of renters don't have a car, 40% of renters, and then 25% of homeowners have one or less car. We have pre-prescribed requirements. So in most places, it's illegal to build a home with one parking space. You have to provide more than that. That applies also to apartments, also commercial, retail, restaurants. The requirements for parking for a restaurant often are, if you look at the envelope of the building on the actual lot, it can take like 1/3 of the piece of property and 2/3 is the actual parking itself. So we have a bill that's aimed at reducing the barriers of creating housing through creating parking flexibility. So it would create a max that cities could require as a precondition for construction. Developers can always build more parking if they feel like that's necessary. An example would be in downtown Olympia. We've reduced the minimum parking requirements there for multifamily or apartments. And in, I think, every single case in the last couple of years, all of the housing that you've seen, they've provided some parking. And another example for commercial is if you go to the west side of Olympia, to the mall on any given day, you're going to see the parking lot be about 90% vacant. However, if they wanted to build that mall today, they would have to build more parking because it doesn't meet the minimum parking requirements. So again, this is about old, outdated parking requirements that were not based in actual utilization. And so it's creating the flexibility. The cost is significant. It can range from a surface parking space of $6,000 to $60,000 for an elevated parking structure. And that cost is passed on to the people that are renting those homes or people that are buying those homes. And it also gets in the way of us achieving our goals, especially near transit. We want to make sure that people have access to transit, and utilization of transit is predicated on how much housing is available, how many people are near the transit to actually use it. So we're trying to find this balance. It passed out of the Senate with bipartisan support, 40 votes. Yes, there's 49 senators. And now it's in the House Local Government Committee. And if you are supportive of that bill, you can always send them a note and let them know.
Thank you. Up next, we'll pivot to one about the capital budget that we received in advance, and that's, will you be supporting the capital improvement funding for South Bay Grange?
Yes, that is on my list of requests, and I've met with the chair of the capital budget committee, so I feel optimistic about its funding, although I can't say that it will absolutely get funded, but I feel good and I'm optimistic, and thank you for asking the question and submitting the request.
All right. Up next, we'll move to one submitted in advance by, let me double check the name real quick, David, which is, how can we advance ranked choice voting, and will you support House Bill 1448?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I don't believe 1448 moved off the House floor. I did vote for it in a state gov, and yeah, I voted for it. And I'm a big fan of ranked choice voting, and I think this bill is, I think, it would be great to have that option, but unfortunately, it did not move off the House floor. But you're doing a great job. I got lots of baggies of ranked choice voting. What's your favorite candy? We use it actually as a caucus in elections occasionally. So people are getting more and more comfortable with it. We got to keep working it.
Absolutely agree. As a city council member, we used it twice, even to replace our great senator when she moved on to the House of Representatives, and just For the third time when I moved into the house, they used it again. So I'm a fan, and let's see what we can do.
Yeah, I've supported that bill as well. And for me, it really, especially the times that we're in, where I think a lot of people feel like politics is a zero-sum game, having the ability to, I think, infuse civility in when you have a ranked choice where people have this incentive to be more civil and be more engaged and work together. Even when you're campaigning, you can do that. And I think that option with ranked choice voting will help actually create more civic engagement and more higher turnout of voters.
All right, we are going to pivot to transportation, which is a question from YouTube from AD, and that's, are there considerations for reducing highway spending in the transportation budget? Those are huge costs that will only increase. That funding is better spent on improving public and mass transit.
Well, I don't think any of us sit on transportation, so we're not the best folks to chat about that. But I will say that our transportation budget, like our general operating budget, is significantly underwater. And so you will see cuts in highways. And unfortunately, you will probably see cuts in transit and other sorts of, other sorts of,
multimodal projects.
Moving, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm having I can't bring the word. But anyway, we are, you're going to see cuts across the board, really. But you will definitely see cuts in highways funding, is my guess. I am excited. I think that intercity transit is doing an incredible job. And it seems like they're going to be able to maintain their free fares, and they are going to roll out a bunch of new routes, which I'm super excited about. And so I think here in the Thurston County area, we're going to see increased services and sort of different services. They've been doing a lot of work and looking at how to reduce commute times and that sort of thing. So pretty excited about what they're planning on rolling out.
All right, we're going to move to a different question submitted on YouTube from Mary, which is, what is the state doing to protect wetlands from homeless encamps on their shores?
I can take a stab at that, but I'm going to need the help of my seatmates probably to finish it. I know that the first thing we have to do is all the work that Senator Bateman has done in the House, as well as she's working in the Senate. We need to build housing. We need to build housing. We, in this budget, unfortunately, are not going to be able to continue some of the monies that we were using for the right-of-way funding, but we need to help the cities move forward in their homelessness plans. For example, I can tell you what Thurston County is doing. We are working from one camp to the next. We are not moving the camp until we actually have some place that's a stabilization site, followed by plans for permanently affordable housing. And that is the best way. If we move folks too soon, they move around the community and they end up in other camps. So we need to be able to manage people where they're at. And we actually currently in the city of Olympia have applied for a grant from the federal government, we'll see if that comes, to purchase the land that the jungle is on. And that, if you're not aware of what the jungle camp is, that's the camp that's between Pacific and Martin. And once we're able to purchase this land, and we have purchase agreements in place for the private ownership there, we will then start to work with making stabilization sites on that property, as well as building in permanently affordable housing. So I think the best thing the state can do is continue helping the local jurisdictions, the counties, the cities that are doing the work. And then when we are able, with our budget, to be able to supplement that and continue the good work Commerce is doing with the cities and move forward.
I think you answered it really well, Rep. Parshley. The only thing I would add is that our the unhoused population in Washington State is a responsibility of every single city. Every city should be providing its per capita share of shelter. to make sure that the most vulnerable among us and the people that are unhoused have a safe place to go, to exist, and to be in absence of having a home. Many cities don't actually have any shelter at all. For many, many years, Olympia was the only city in Thurston County that had any shelter. Now, fortunately, due to regional collaboration, we have a shelter in Lacey as well. But what you see is cities that don't have any shelter, and then the cities that do, they are providing services. We always want to make sure that we have services for people. But because those other cities aren't providing it, they can provide a disproportionate share, which is a fiscal burden and an administrative burden on that city. So we've seen a couple pieces of legislation to try to get at that, making sure that all cities are providing that support through not criminalizing homelessness, so that we can ensure that everyone has a place to go. Unfortunately, some of those bills did not make it. So we'll continue working on this, but we also continue helping our cities. The Jungle project is an example, and we've gotten funding for other projects that have enabled the city of Olympia to clear encampments. And then we also had the successful I-5 corridor project that provided funding for getting people off of the rights of way along the I-5 corridor, get them housed, and then make sure that those spaces were not becoming encampments again. That was a very successful program. There are ongoing challenges with operations and maintenance of the facilities where individuals go. We need more case managers. We need more providers that can provide things like medication-assisted treatment, behavioral health therapy, and all of those things. And those are things that we'll continue focusing on.
Thank you. Pivoting to one that we received both in the survey and online on YouTube is one from Meredith that's, I'm still not clear. Are you trying to continue funding for all parts of Medicaid Apple Health, for people's access to rural health care, for seniors' access to nursing homes, for pregnancies?
I'll start, and if my colleagues want to add, I know Rep Parshley is on healthcare as well. I'm not sure if you're talking specifically about a proposal in Washington state, but I don't believe we have any that proposes to cut Medicaid. There are conversations at the federal level about changes there, or people fearing that there could be changes there. We have things like federal matches from the federal government, and some of those I know in July will be ending. So we have concerns if they're going to actually continue on with those funding. But Medicaid is still in place in Washington. It's a priority of Washington state because it provides services to all of the things you identified: rural access to healthcare, dental, behavioral health, primary care for low-income folks, access for children to get access to children dentistry, which is really important. All of those programs we will continue to support. And the one thing I would say is that with the federal government and the administration, all the changes that they're making, these draconian cuts that are not targeted, that are not focused, that are just across the board cuts without any consideration on the impacts of people, we can't predict what's going to happen. And unfortunately, we don't know. So every day we're dealing with this in real time, like many of you. The best thing that we can do is provide a balanced budget that puts us in the best situation, meaning that we have progressive revenue so we can shore up and strengthen our funding so that we have the best future possible in order to respond to anything that happens. But if something drastic happens, we're going to have to respond to that in real time.
I think you answered it extremely well. I understand there's, I can answer one really cool bill that came out of the healthcare, and it's over in Senate now, which is helping provide care at a copay cost for prenatal and postnatal care for women that are pregnant, or people that are pregnant. So that's exciting. And we've also looked at Medicaid, Medicare, being able to allow, for example, physician's assistants or nurse practitioners in rural counties to be able to try to work with Medicaid, Medicare to get equal reimbursements as if they were an MD if there's not an MD around. And why is this important? Because oftentimes the PAs and the nurse practitioners are paying for the entire clinic and having to pay for staff. So they need to have an increase. This also came out of the House, and this hopefully will help. The one last thing that I can say is if the federal government does decide to cut Medicaid, Medicare, it is going to be our rural portions of Washington that are going to be most harmed and those that are most impacted. So if you're going to speak up and speak out, please do so for the rural county districts, for the legislature, as well as the congressional districts.
Thank you. Similarly, on the federal note, we're going to go to a submitted question from Yanit, which is, anything you all can do about wildfire protection with so many cuts to the Forest Service?
Yeah, huge problem. I think especially this year, our snowpack is pretty low. And we don't all want to be sneezing from wildfire smoke. But there's 2 bills in the House. 1522 specifically deals with ensuring that our utilities that are regulated by the UTC in particular have wildfire plans. They must have a wildfire plan. And we are adding oversight from the Utilities and Transportation Commission, that is their regulator. So that bill is in the Senate now, 1522, and then 1539 is also dealing with wildfire risk, and it is also a bill that we've passed off the House floor. So we're doing some work in that space for sure.
Okay, sticking with the kind of federal focus here, we also received a question of, in light of the current administration, what's being done to be more legislatively aggressive? Says that Democrats have historically been passive and that's no longer tolerable in today's climate.
Well, the first thing I would say, and I'll let my colleagues add, is we heard from our very own Senator Patty Murray, and she was the one that led the charge to vote no on the continuing resolution because she felt very strongly that it was an open check to the Trump administration to do untold things with the budget. So she was very vocal about that. She's very strong about that, very ardent about that. So I don't think that, I don't know if I would characterize that as a passive act. I think that we're seeing an organization happen amongst Democrats in response to what's happening at the federal level, because it's dangerous and it's unprecedented and the law is being violated. At the state level, we're introducing a ton of policies and proposals that are very bold, very big, very progressive. You're going to see us, and you have seen us take some actions that are very, very big and bold this year. So I think that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, I think I saw some questions, please tell us what to do. And, I had a neighbor in my, come by my house when I was gardening on Sunday. What can we do? It's what we are seeing is something we've never seen before, right? This is unprecedented. We're basically living in a lawless country. Even the courts are not keeping, they openly are defying court orders. It's a very scary time. I think, taking to the streets, demonstrating, telling your stories, making sure that we know what your stories are, making sure that Patty Murray knows what the stories are. She's got quite a voice to share what's going on the ground, but she doesn't have a lot of information because she can't get a hold of agencies, actively participating in boycotts, anything that you see that you think is an action that you could take and that you can go out and do. It is time to do that. There is no, Senator Murray was very clear. This is not the time to hold back. This is the time to get active and to demonstrate and to take to the streets and to fight back. I wish I could tell you, what is the thing that we can do? We are passing laws. There's an environmental crimes bill that is, hopefully going to fill in for some of the, the lack of regulation at the EPA that we are going to see. And protecting our trans kids. We are doing things like that. We have already done a lot in, Keep Washington Working was done in the first round. So we have a lot of good laws in place that help to protect us and from the changes at the federal level. And so we will continue to do that. I would also say that we have community, and anything that you can do to strengthen our community. For me, I was like, what can I do that's tangible right now? I went out and I pulled weeds from, Squaxin Park. Like, it made me feel like I was participating in my community, and no one can take away that from me, because I can always participate in my community in a constructive way. And so I went and I volunteered in a school. Like, those things helped me keep my spirits up and my hope up. So I would also advise, figuring out things like that keep your spirits up in this very, very, very challenging time.
I'll just jump in really quick that a lot of people, and this is something Senator Murray said too, their responses right now to kind of withdraw and be afraid. I'm very concerned about the dissidents being targeted. We're seeing people, the gentleman that was a Columbia student that was targeted, he's a resident here. He has legal protection like you or I do, and he's deported by people wearing plain clothes in an unmarked vehicle, and his pregnant wife that was standing there wasn't told where he was going or what was happening to him. These are clear violations of the law. They're meant to intimidate people, and people are responding in fear in some cases. And what we heard from Senator Murray is we need to do the opposite of that. We need to, if you see something, say something. Be aware of what's going on. If you see something that you feel is unjust and not right, speak out about it, organize locally, take to the streets like Beth Doglio said, and also build community. I know that that's kind of a general term, but I think, one thing that we know is autocracies, they flourish when when they're separated, when they feel like it's divisive, when they feel isolated, when they're not connected, when they're cynical. That all helps what they're doing right now. It all makes it stronger. And so figuring out what that means to you could be different. It could be making sure that you're connected to your faith-based organization. It could be volunteering for a local nonprofit that's seeing cuts happen. It could be going to your school board meeting. It could be talking to us. But building that community health and resiliency is one of the best things that we can do in the face of what we have happening.
I'll finish this off. I think we're all feeling the fear, and I think Senator Bateman said it perfectly. It's tempting to withdraw. Every day when I drive into the legislature, I listen to the radio, and I almost have to turn it off sometimes. So I get that. I get how you're feeling. Somehow, like Patty Murray said, Senator Murray, we have to take those emotions and we have to channel them. And we have to find our voice, and we have to find our place in the community. And we have to let the administration know this is not acceptable. The one thing we know about the current president is he doesn't like when the community and the country comes up in arms. He does not like that. Think about the first Women's March. He kept saying that his inaugural crowd was 10 times the greatest crowd in the world, whereas the Women's March not only happened in Washington, D.C., but in cities across the country in the hundreds of thousands of people. So we need to get that kind of movement going. We need to speak up because we are in a constitutional crisis. And the best way we can do that is to get that voice, find a way to channel that fear into the community, into the greater community. We need to reach out to the legislators and the Congress people. We have two congressmen in the Eastern Washington that need to hear from you. The Republicans that are staying silent, shame on them. This is their country too. You need to speak up to them and send them emails and say, look, we may not agree on a lot of our policies, but we have to take care of this country. And then lastly, we need to support our statewide office holders. For example, Attorney General Nick Brown. I mean, he's stepping up every time he can. We as legislators need to make sure we protect his portion of the budget. So every time the Trump administration does something crazy, Washington can step up and say, yeah, no, we're not going to put up with that. I had a long conversation with our treasurer, Pellicati, and he said that he's been working for the last 6 months to make sure that the credit rating of the state of Washington was as good as he could make it in case we had to go and borrow money. Because as we heard from Congresswoman Strickland last weekend in Olympia, or 2 weekends ago, 12 months until the first primaries for Congress, 12 months. We can start looking at trying to get back Congress, which is one of many, but one potential check against this administration. And we have to focus on this. It's not 4 years, 12 months, and we can do this. And you can help us when we bring forward things like progressive revenue, when we are bringing out the best budget we can, and that has been described to me as a recession budget without a recession. We are doing the best work we can. So stick with us. Let us know when we're doing good, when we're doing bad, and just use your voice. Because as Albert Einstein said, we're living in dangerous times, not because of the evil, but because we are not speaking up, and we have to do that.
Thank you. And I think we have time for potentially one more question. And I think, Rep. Doglio, you had highlighted that there was one that you had wanted to answer. So I'm going to go ahead and kick that to you, and I can get it up onto the screen.
Yeah, I just saw it's an issue about crime. Clearly, we want to address it, and it has a huge impact on people who experience that. We do have a bill in the House that moved off the House floor, sponsored by Representative Deborah Entenman, that does work towards getting more money to local jurisdictions to assist with public safety. It's sort of part of the answer to Governor Ferguson's focus on getting $100 million to support more police officers on our streets. I think we have some concerns about a one-time $100 million expenditure that doesn't have sustainable funding. So Representative Deborah Entenman introduced a bill that does provide for an ongoing tax for public safety and security at the local level. So hoping to see the Senate take action on that. And so that is something that we're all very concerned about.
We've also invested in the local training academy that Lacey is working for, so that we can get officers to go through that training program locally, because apparently it's in Eastern Washington and that's hard for families to have their loved one go away for training for periods of time. So that's something that we've focused on as well.
And if I might highlight, Rep. Entenmann's bill is also, if this we get this all the way through to the governor's desk, will help strengthen communities like Olympia that has the crisis response unit. It will increase our funding for that, as well as training for that. And those are critical as much as people with guns in the community, but making sure that we're helping people in crisis and people who are suffering at this moment, which reduces also risks.
Okay, we're going to do one last quick question and then go ahead to closing remarks. So the last one is, what is the best website or news site to follow for Washington legislative news? I feel like it's hard to find out what's going on.
So I would recommend the Observer and the Standard. I think the Standard is free. The Observer is a subscription based. Also, TVW covers like all of the hearings, and you can live stream that on your computer. And they also have a lot of just in-depth reporting about what's going on in the legislature every day, and you can watch the hearings live. So I would definitely tune into TVW because they are actually a really great source of information about what's going on in the legislature.
I I love you, Beth, but I don't know if I'm going to encourage people to go to TVW. Sorry. I would be overwhelmed if I was a person who wasn't in the legislature going to TVW just for general news. If there's a bill, I would definitely recommend you can go and you can see it live. You can hear the discussion, legislators' comments on the floor if there's a specific bill, like when we're debating the budget, perhaps. If you subscribe to our newsletters, we try to provide synopses of the different things that we're working on and kind of the big picture. I think the Observer and the Standard are great. I also, I still subscribe to the Olympian and then also the Seattle Times because you can get some of the things that are happening there. I think that local journalism is really important in having those subscriptions, even though I might complain about the lack of information that I'm getting. I do think that that's good to do and is important.
Yeah, the Seattle Times and the Olympian I also subscribe to as well, and try and keep up with those two, as well as the New York Times, so that you know what's going on nationally. There are like segments though on TVW where they kind of go into depth if there's something you're interested in. Like, I don't know, Rep Bateman, you've probably been on talking about housing.
Sure.
I've been talking about the environment. I think those are good. The impact. There's also some quick podcasts that some of our members really use to try and stay up about what's going on in the other chamber. So,
Capital Ideas is one of the podcasts, I think. And I listen to NPR, KUOW, because twice a day they have a focus on what's happening in the legislature and particularly about the budget. And then they will correlate that with some of the federal work or lack of work. So I everything they've said, yes, and our e-newsletters. We also have Facebook. Sometimes if we've got a bill that we're excited about, we'll put a little post up and there's usually a link. You can go to the bill right on the website.
I don't have Facebook, but
for your...
I'll add a quick plug that the Capital Ideas podcast that Rep Parshley just mentioned, she was also the most recent guest on the episode that was just put out.
Check that out.
Anywhere you listen to podcasts. But with that, we can go ahead and head to closing remarks. Senator Bateman, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here, for tuning in, for adding your questions and helping us to hear your concerns. Like Rep Doglio said at the beginning of this town hall, we are going to have another one of these in a couple short weeks that will be in person. We're still getting the location, but we'll be sending that out on our e-newsletter or our Facebook. So please check in there so you can find out how you can get involved and make sure that you're there and we can see you in community together. I would just say you being here tonight is huge. In times like these, it's really important that we connect with each other, that you're advocating for the things that are important to you and your families, that you're speaking out. We have to continue doing that. We have to continue no matter how overwhelming it can seem, the fact that there's so many things happening every single day, this onslaught that we're in, it's on purpose. And what we can't do is just numb ourselves to it and tune it out. We have to continue speaking out and saying, this is unprecedented, this is illegal, these things are not allowed. You can't just eliminate, employees that are congressionally funded and congressionally approved. Like, the president does not have the authority to do that. We have to continue that fight. Our Attorney General, he has on his website a news link that you can see. And that really, I think, helps a lot of people because a lot of these actions are going to be through the court system, protecting our democracy, protecting Washingtonians. And you can see all the actions that he's taking, much like his predecessor when he fought the Trump administration 100 times and won 99 of them, protecting us and fighting for us in Washington state. So to tune into that, continue checking in with us and continue being strong in your community and connecting with others.
Thank you for being here. I think part of how we're going to get through this is people being engaged, and you're engaged. So this is important. I saw a note from Alfie again about giving up is unforgivable, and I have a button that someone gave me that says never give up, and I have that on my desk and the House floor, and we're never going to give up. Our democracy is, something that has been tried and true for, several hundred years now, and so we're not going to give that up. And we're going to be fighting for you. And again, we are only as good as legislators as our constituents help us be. You are our eyes and ears in what's going on in the community. And please stay in touch with us. And we will be back with an in-person. I think it's really important for us to be in community together. So we'll be back with an in-person in April, and hopefully we'll get to see you in person. So I really appreciate, I look at my email regularly. You've been really great about sending me ideas about how you'd like to see things move and change, and either be, kill bills or vote for bills. I monitor it closely, so I really appreciate you keeping in touch with me in that way. It makes a big difference. It really does.
I have to say ditto to everything they've said, but also let everybody here know that the people are what is giving me hope. All of you are giving me hope. I've been reading, as we've been talking, some of the questions that we didn't get to in the comments. I just have to say we three are very lucky to be working for LD22. I love you guys. You're giving us the power, the Energizer Bunny, to keep doing this. I'm very proud to be part of the House Democratic Caucus because I've seen some amazing bravery and sticking together despite the best efforts to tear us apart. And you being here tonight, you reaching out like Representative Doglio said, giving us those emails, telling us what you think, gives us that power. I look forward to seeing you guys in person, and it's been my pleasure and honor to be here for you all.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for joining us. If we weren't able to get to your question, we'll have contact info up in just a couple of seconds. Please feel free to reach out so that folks can get your questions answered. Thank you all so much and have a great night.
Bye, everybody. See you in a couple
Bye.
weeks.